and the temptation, the creative process, when you're ultimately judging it based on like the success metric of some level of conversion and sales and money, is that no matter what you're doing, you end up just trying to shift it more towards a sort of hard sell. And then the quality of the creative drops, and then everything doesn't work. And then you look back at the investment, you go, well, it's never works. It's never actually helped sales, because, you know, your initial starting point of measuring it badly has done that.
So hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Overdrive Digital Podcast. As always, if you like it, please do give us a share, give us a shout out, give us a follow. You can find us on all the usual platforms like SoundCloud, iTunes, Spotify, and so on and so forth. So for this episode, recording from the lockdown state, and have a special guest, Phil Nottingham, video strategist. Hey Phil.
Hello, John.
How are you, and how's life in isolation for you?
It's all right. I'm doing quite a lot of yoga. I know that's my sort of virtuous side. I'm also drinking a lot and making some nice food. So I'm sort of trying to make the best of it, and sort of not really knowing what each day holds, I guess. But crazy time.
It is an absolutely crazy time. One, like, kind of, obviously, like, it would be good to go into your background and everything else. We're going to be talking a lot about video marketing and general, like, strategy behind video, I suppose. But given where we're at as a country or a world right now, like, surely this makes video more relevant than ever.
I think there's kind of a double-edged sword to this. I think yes and no. Like, certainly it makes that central communication of like recording things over camera and chatting to each other more prevalent. But it also has added in a kind of interesting challenge of creativity. So most of my friends who work in the production space are all out of work now, because most video production is predicated on the idea that you need people to be able to congregate, and there's normally a sort of couple of actors, and if you've got 4 to 5 people on set at least, that you can't do that at the moment. So we're kind of in a new world where I suppose there's new creative formats being developed, and you see this all the time. Like TikTok's obviously had a very good revival just because the nature of the kind of beast there, and I think there'll be more of that, where we sort of start to see people and then subsequently brands kind of playing around with different formats that people can make on their own. I'm not sure any of us really know what that looks like yet, but I'm certainly confident that there is a world in which brands can start communicating with very low production value content in a very authentic way that is very meaningful. And I think that is going to be an interesting space where a lot of brands who subsequently are probably investing in more higher end production or more interactive content, or sort of stuff that generally needs a group of people in a room to come together to make, will perhaps some of that budget is going to shift to more low budget video, and that will be an interesting space that sort of probably reduces barrier to entry for a lot of businesses. Yep. And I think that's going to be real positive. Yeah. But certainly there's a massive shift now happening in the video space.
I think it's going to be really interesting over the next couple of weeks to see how brands respond when their marketing activity starts to pick up again through all of this. And in a way, I think it does forces a new way of thinking. And in turn, I think will force some interesting creative ideas.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I agree. I mean, I've had a few of them myself, which I'm going to sort of start pitching to a few people to see if we can get off the ground. But I do think you're right. I think there's a bit of that going on. But it's a scary time for brands. And the other thing that makes it challenging from a video perspective is typically businesses, video's a reasonably significant investment for most companies if they're doing it, not just from the sort of production spend standpoint, but also from distribution spend, the talent you need to get in to do it properly, all that kind of stuff. And I think that is a challenge, because a lot of companies wanting to batten down the hatches, not make any new big investments that are maybe high risk, and it's going to be interesting to see how we can allow people to be creative with still reducing that level of risk and trying
absolutely.
New stuff as well.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting for sure. So I guess, like, in terms of your background, you started your career in SEO, right?
Sort of. I mean, so the full story is I studied like theatre and film directing at drama school for my university. So I went off to conservatoire in London and faffed about there for a while, and then worked as a stuntman, a lighting technician. And
a stuntman?
Yeah, I was a stuntman for a couple of years.
Any highlights, Phil?
Broke my knuckle on the set of Pirates of the Caribbean. That was quite fun. Yeah, just a man with a sword, basically. That was me. So that was great fun. I think the highlight is probably performing in Moscow. I did a really fun thing in stage in Moscow. That was great. But so I did that for years, did some, whatever jobs I could get my hands on, basically, in the sort of theatre world. Ran out of money, ended up moving back in with my parents, and kind of, in a bit of a low point, took a sort of admin job at a company that was doing the technology behind Sky TV. And this was just like when Sky Plus was sort of coming in as a big thing. Yep. So recording live TV was like a revolutionary thing. Streaming was like just in its very infancy. Yep. And I sort of was moved about a little bit in that company, where I started doing some of the like encoding and transport stream stuff. So learned a bunch of the kind of really nerdy technical stuff behind video, like delivery and distribution. So I'm happy to nerd out about bit rates at any point. And then from there, ended up going into working for an agency called Distilled, who've just recently been bought by Brain Labs. And there I sort of trained up as a junior SEO and was working kind of doing SEO for years. And then realized, well, hold on a minute, I have kind of my odd choices along the way mean that I have a quite unique skill set, and I understand the technical side of video, I understand the sort of search and distribution side of video, and I understand the creative side. Well, I can use that to my advantage, and have sort of done so ever since, really.
Amazing. And then, so from that point, you've kind of, I think when you were at Distilled, like I remember reading a lot of content that you were putting out around optimizing videos for YouTube, and really kind of using that SEO mentality and approach, but to, distribute video, which was like, I don't think there are many, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but it is quite a niche set of skills and knowledge to really kind of push video properly.
Yeah, I mean, if I can blow my own trumpet for a second, I think it is. I think it is unique, and I think a lot of people are trying to do it applying the wrong principles. So I think if you go out and just like search video SEO articles, you'll find like there's just tons and tons out there. Most of them are completely wrong and have no idea, and are just sort of trying to apply some very generic SEO principles to YouTube. And YouTube doesn't really work like that, and the kind of broader search landscape of video is a lot more complicated and nuanced. And most of the effective distribution is around creative and getting people to click it and work through, and and that's a very different skill. So I think it's like, from what I've seen, there's people who approach it from like a kind of very creative standpoint, and they know half the story. There's people who approach it from the kind of technical SEO side, they know half the story. But there is stuff that really, it all comes together when you kind of marry the strategy and the technical distribution. You understand that whole journey of how someone's going to find something, how they're going to amplify it, how it's going to kind of expand into wider spheres and that kind of thing. So yeah, I think that's where, for me, the specificity of video as a media type is interesting, and where I think it differs from a lot of more like page-centric SEO that most of us are generally familiar with.
Yeah, sure. And do you think so in terms of what you see out in the video world and brands, there's obviously everyone's trying to do a bit of video to some degree, I think, but like what are the most common mistakes you see, I guess, around distribution, but also around creative? And I think possibly sometimes it's kind of like any content, isn't it? If you're just deciding as a brand or a business, we're going to do video, okay, but like the stuff that really works well tends to, in my experience, be the more genuine, authentic. There's actually a reason behind needing to use video. It's not just we're going to do video. So that's my take on it. But what mistakes do you see people making most frequently?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there. The major mistakes, I guess recently I've been obsessed with thinking about it through the lens of measurement. So I see that the mistakes are often made when people are obsessed with the wrong success metrics. And I see two kind of general trends in this. One is the sort of performance marketing mistake, which is people come at it from a perspective of like conversion. So they're looking through any investment in video in terms of ROI, how it's going to deliver return in terms of that bottom line, money in, money out kind of thing. Almost like they're, judging it like you would judge PPC. And the major issue with this is it just inherently removes any focus on what matters in terms of creativity. So if you measure everything in terms of its conversions, even if that's just like assisted conversions, it doesn't matter the attribution model. If you're just looking at that, the nature of the way in which attribution modeling works and its limitations mean that you are just measuring ostensibly how much the video is a sales tool. And of course, video can be a sales tool, but very few videos ultimately are. Most of them, the major benefit is through brand, it's through building that connection with an audience, it's through stuff that's a bit further up the funnel. And if you judge it just based on conversions, you end up kind of changing the creative to make everything a sales video. And so I noticed it and just everything becomes hard sell, becomes hard. And the creative process, when you're ultimately judging it based on the success metric of some level of conversion and sales and money, is that no matter what you're doing, you end up just trying to shift it more towards a sort of hard sell. And then the quality of the creative drops, and then everything doesn't work. And then you look back at the investment, you go, well, it's never works. It's never actually helped sales, because your initial starting point of measuring it badly has done that. The other mistake is completely on the opposite side. It's from companies who usually start from a kind of maybe a brand or an advertising perspective, where they just measure everything in terms of reach, and everything is in terms of how many people watched it, how much did it go viral, how many people saw it on YouTube. And then all you're doing is you're just playing the game of optimizing for bots, basically, and just how many impressions can we get on YouTube, all of which ultimately has no impact on the brand either, because it's you don't build a brand just by touch points or just hitting people with the same 2 seconds of video thousands of times. And so companies there will often make something that they just designed to be eye-catching for 2 seconds, and it'll all be really short, really quick content that just isn't good in its own way. And then they'll just think, well, it's really good because all these people saw it and we distributed it very efficiently. But they've never actually made any emotional connection or really spoken to an audience properly. So on both cases, I think you end up polishing a turd ostensibly to fix the measurement problem that you had to start with, where you just chose the wrong thing to look at, and then the creative suffered. So I think that's the major mistake that businesses make. In terms of that, you asked one question about sort of distribution. The major common mistake I see is that everyone just builds their house on YouTube and just says YouTube is the default platform for all video distribution, everything should be on YouTube. And that's just a misunderstanding of the way YouTube works. And the way you optimize for YouTube is not just to shove everything on there. It's much more about building a carefully calibrated channel, chopping up content to make sure that you can have clips and stuff that's optimized for certain terms and all that kind of thing, rather than just laying everything that you have on there. That isn't how you get the most views or the most effective engagement on YouTube at all. So I think that's the most common distribution error that people make.
Yeah, and it's in terms of I think I'm really interested to come on to the distribution point, because there are so many, in my head anyway, from outside of this expertise, there are so many different ways to use video beyond YouTube, be that a 60-second clip on LinkedIn or whatever it is. In terms of the KPIs, there still has to be a way of measuring. So, as a brand, you've put in investment in, financial investment, time, everything else. You still have to get some measurement back. But I imagine that when you're doing video right, surely the benefits are they're widespread, perhaps a little bit softer in terms of, if you're a B2B client and you're putting video out and you're engaging prospects, you will never be able to track that sale back to the video, but you might go into that first pitch and they'll be like, I already feel familiar with you as a brand and a set of people. How do you measure, what should people be measuring without shooting themselves in the foot, but genuinely getting a sense of how well it's working?
Yeah, I love that question. So I will answer it directly. I'll just quickly caveat with a couple of it. So I don't think there are some videos which you can measure in terms of conversion and some in terms of reach. So if you are just doing a quick, snappy YouTube ad that you're just trying to start that initial discussion, reach is not necessarily the worst metric to use. Sure. Although I think you want to qualify it with not just any old impressions, but really validated impressions. And conversions, certainly, a product page video, assisted conversions is exactly the right metric to be using. That said, if you're kind of investing in video more broadly, like from a kind of brand perspective, and you're maybe trying to do it on social media, you're trying to build up, like you're doing a blog or the expansion of a podcast, that kind of thing. So the type of stuff that you're really doing just to sort of drum up interest, build brand affinity, brand awareness. The metrics that matter most, the core single most important metric is time spent. So the amount of time that people are actually actively choosing to engage with your content. This isn't time spent in terms of like ads. So just like how much have we collectively like shoved our stuff in front of people, but how much like qualified, chosen, active minutes is somebody spending with you? And you can then, break that down if you want to go further on a per user level. So you can like allocate a sort of metric that indicates someone's a fan or a super fan. And what you really want to be doing is building up that core audience of people who actively care about and listen to you, because that's how brands are grown. It's not through like just impressions and reach, it's through people talking about you. So what you want to do is build up an audience of people who are actively talking about you, and that core fandom will expand and spread the word of mouth, the positive message about your business. And that's ultimately how word of mouth grows. It's about focusing on a small group of people who really, really care, rather than just trying to get like a 10-second impression from hundreds of millions of people. So go really niche for your audience and just care mostly about the focus, the time that people are actually spending. That's the most important metric. The other things that you can then think about is like, you can tie your CRM to this. So you can say, well, how many emails have I captured? How many people have like chosen to subscribe to our output, or how many podcast subscribers do we have? How many YouTube subscribers? That kind of thing. And then the last thing is probably like brand search. Like if you're doing brand well, then you should start to see that overall demand for like queries that include your brand name go up. Yeah. And obviously you can just track that in Search Console. It's not super reliable, but it's a reasonable sort of relative benchmark that you can use to see if your things are going in the right direction. So those are the three metrics that like time spent, subscribers, brand search, that I think are the most important metrics for measuring the investment in creative video content.
Yeah, interesting stuff there. And like, I guess it's keeping it simple as well. Like there's just always this tendency to overcomplicate and,
absolutely
right. What is the actual genuine business impact, and what's the simplest way I can measure it?
I notice this a lot with like when people kind of take the conversion that you can't measure conversions to heart, but then they'll like say, well, let's come up with a kind of compound metric that includes some conversion stuff, but also some, some other thing. And that's fine, but it just becomes so divorced from reality that it becomes hard to really think about it from an active perspective. Whereas I still think time spent is like slightly abstract, which makes it more challenging than views for people to understand. But you can still kind of look at it and go, well, okay, here's the amount of time that people are watching our videos. We want to see that increase over time. And then your CRM thing is like, well, we want to see the number of overall fans increase, and we want to kind of see that these fans are actively watching more day by day. And that's just concrete enough that you can mentally imagine what it is, rather than just like, oh, we've got this compound one metric of 5 million and it's now gone to 6 million the next day, and it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, I was just trying to find so Joe Wixs and his PE initiative. And I think it was week one. I was trying to find the stat that he put out, and the amount of time watched in that first week was absolutely insane.
I bet. Yeah.
I'll try and find it and dig it out, but you just think like, right, that is a genuine reflection on how successful that, it's not a campaign really, is it? But let's call it a campaign, has been, because you've got, X number of households sat in front of that channel for 30 minutes of every morning.
Exactly.
Impressions mean nothing.
And I think it really helps to understand like why we seem to by default measure impressions and views rather than time spent. And to be fair to like Google and YouTube, they have tried to shift this. Like they've provided the time spent metric for a long time. It's just that their version of the time spent metric is disingenuous because it includes people who've like spent 5 seconds watching an ad while they were actually trying to get something else. But the reason we do it is just because of TV. It's just because like back in the day, all we had was rough viewership numbers. That's all we had to work on. And then we would basically try and work off that. And then impressions were made off that basis for like rough TV ads and how they were sold. And we've just fallen into this default of assuming that the limitations of the past should dictate the metrics of the present. And we have far better things available. But most most of big brands are too, stuck in their ways of doing things from yesteryear that they can move forward. So, just because the big brands do it doesn't mean it's right.
Yeah, absolutely. And one question that was kind of going to put to you was, so obviously as a business, we focus a lot on paid social. So when we're using video, usually it's for a very tactical purpose. For example, building up a retargeting audience and prospecting. So rather than building up a retargeting audience by sending people to content, we're building up a retargeting list with people who have viewed certain amounts of certain videos to then funnel them and nurture them into the next stage of the journey. So in that case, actually the goal of the commercial goal of that video is to build up a qualified retargeting audience at the lowest possible cost.
Yep.
So there are, again, this is me putting my take on everything on you, really, but that's quite a tactical deployment of video.
Yeah, absolutely, and I agree. Video is a media type, right? You can use it for lots of different things. The only thing that I would say on the kind of retargeting, building a retargeting list, which I think is very worthwhile, is that it's most useful when you set a very high level of qualification in terms of the amount of video somebody's watched. So like if someone's watched 70% of a 5-minute video, that's a far greater level of qualification than they watched 5 seconds of a 15-second video, whatever. So you think about it in terms of like what you're really trying to do is like, say somebody saw our video, they cared about it, they were interested. And the defaults that you find in Facebook are not really set up for that, because again, like what Facebook want to do is mask the fact that most of the videos, right, exactly, yeah. So as with Facebook and Google, I think you've got to do that extra work to make sure that the way you're setting up your campaigns is sufficiently well optimized that you're avoiding the pitfalls of like just accepting very low levels of qualification as valid, and just try to kind of reach that better stuff and set the high threshold and then optimize for that rather than choose the defaults. But yeah, I mean, that's the story of all these platforms, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's all about, I guess it's context, isn't it? And applying, like if best practice states that you should only retarget people who viewed 75% of your video, that doesn't apply in equal measure to a 10-second video and a 5-minute video.
Right, exactly.
People don't think about it.
I know, it's so silly, isn't it? And you see all these like odd posts that come out, like videos need to be really short. It's like, they need to be really short because you've taken that perspective that they need to watch 75% of video. Well, the best way to optimize somebody watching 75% of a video is to make the video 5 seconds long.
Yeah.
then they have no choice but to watch 75% of it. But that doesn't mean that they really engage with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like, do you have any examples of brands that are doing really well at all of this, or like any? Because sometimes when you're starting along the journey of video, or you're starting to plan out what you might be doing, looking for ideas is really useful. So, like, who are your favorites in this sphere?
So one of my favorites is like MailChimp. They're doing great stuff. And they're investing in like really crazy long form stuff now, which I love. Hodinkee, which is like a media company that deal with watches, doing really cool stuff.
Okay.
On smaller business level, I love Anderton's, which is a guitar shop in Guildford.
Yep.
Love everything they put out. Yeah, very clever, like just really simple, good TV content, basically. Who else do I like? Zendesk have done a few nice things as well in the kind of SaaS space. A whole bunch of companies.
But going back to that Anderton's example, and I'd highly recommend people go and check that out, because it's just an amazing channel. And first off, the level of production is great. Like the standard of it is amazing, but it's just got this very really clear concept behind it. Like it's not just another random channel. Like there's a very clear concept with clear characters. And it strikes me as a very genuine, we want to put out great tuition. We want to put out some great advice for people learning. It doesn't I'm sure there are commercial benefits to it, I'm sure. But it doesn't come across as something that was completely motivated by commercial benefits.
No, I don't think it was. I've watched an interview with Lee Anderson, the owner of the company, and he sort of said they just started it kind of, as a thing to try out, and then it emerged and benefited over time, and then they saw the business benefit. But absolutely, they came in it from a perspective of, well, let's build an audience, let's sort of try and have that community feel rather than let's try and make money. So they were thinking long term, how do we build the brand, how do we build up that audience, and that's exactly what they've done. And you're right, like it looks really high quality, but actually it's very simple. They've just got a dedicated space, cut the cameras, hired some people to operate the cameras, and then everything else has emerged over time as they found their style, they found the characters, and they've sort of just done these things. I'm sure they can now knock out 3 to 4 of these videos a day, and each video will get 1 million views. I mean, that's it's pretty good going, right?
Yeah, really good, really good. There's a few great examples in the music space. Like I don't know if you've seen That Pedal Show.
Yeah, again, great. I mean, that strikes me.
Very nerdy here.
We were just talking about guitar stuff, but that's fine. That Pedal Show is interesting because I think that's like more of a media play than like they are a kind of media company, right? They've just started a little niche media business, and I think that's where we can see the examples of all this stuff that I think brands should start to replicate. Like, there's a lot of companies doing, like really interesting niche media stuff. Like I mentioned, this Hodinkee one, which is this watch company, just doing like really cool interviews. I think I found them through Anderton's because they both did interviews with John Mayer, and it was just sort of that.
Oh, really?
So it's just sort of that kind of thing. We're talking about different stuff, and like you can see that there's then space. Like these media companies, brands should either buy these media companies or replicate what they're doing, because they're sort of finding a way to build a business that is self-sustaining enough that it has revenue through advertising, through sponsorship, or whatever. But actually, like what they've really done is built up that core niche audience that brands would love to own, and that's what brands should be doing, basically.
Do you think there's a benefit to being a smaller business here, because you often have a lot more freedom to just go out and test something, or like try doing something genuine? There's not necessarily that immediate commercial pressure behind it that probably is the killer for great video, I imagine.
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. I think, well, sort of, yeah, maybe this will change over time, but like you've got to be sort of have enough. Like it's hard for one person businesses, right? Like you've got to have a bit of leeway to be able to try something, but it's definitely easier for smaller companies where they can afford to be more experimental. There's not the approval process. There's not the kind of the expected like activity of using a media agency and using a production agency and all that kind of stuff that ultimately can hold things back. You kind of want to be able to bring this in-house as much as you can, and just try stuff out. And certainly smaller businesses can afford to take those risks. I think bigger businesses can too, but they just don't, for obvious and justifiable reasons. But it's the same as like with social media and even websites back in the day. The best websites were not made by the giant company. It wasn't General Electric initially coming out and having this great website. It was Amazon, or these smaller companies that then became the big companies. And the same's true now, right? It's just a different play. And Anderton's a great example. They're a small single shop in Guildford. They have brand reach far greater than their big corporate competitors now, and they'll probably become the big corporate competitor that your next new guitar store in 10 years' time will need to take on. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
With whatever world we're dealing with then, I don't know.
Well, week by week, right? So to kind of wrap things up, like where should, if someone's decided, yep, it's in the plan, we really want to do this from a genuine perspective, like where do brands start? Like where should they go and look for equipment? What's the first step in the process? What should the planning look like? What's your advice to someone who's decided that, yes, we're going to do this?
Yeah, so I have kind of 2 bits of advice, one on the strategy, one on the production side. So on the production side, it's like just start small. Doesn't matter what you've got. You got a phone, you got a laptop. Just get some stuff out there. Like there is no risk to putting out things that are not very good. Yep. What happens in the world of video when something's not very good is nobody watches it. That's fine. You're not going to have like some great negative brand experience just from putting out something a bit low quality.
Such a good point.
And it's easy just to take it down at the end where if it doesn't really work, it's fine. So it's completely low risk. If you are a smaller business that feels comfortable doing that, just try stuff. Just put things out. Doesn't matter quality. If somebody has a go at it, who cares? So, just use whatever. And then like you can slowly build up what you want in terms of equipment, invest in some microphones. We were chatting at the start about microphones. Get yourself just a good desktop condenser microphone, 50 quid or whatever will get you started. Just start, doing stuff via webcam. Like Wixs has a tool called Soapbox, which is really great. Like just a quick and easy video creation and editing tool that allows you to make some quite nice looking stuff with screen shares and webcams. Try using that. So I think there's something to be said for just like, doesn't matter what you're doing, just try stuff. Even if it's just a quick product video, great. And I would encourage you to think about doing it yourself as much as possible, rather than like using one of these animation services or something. Like, don't spend a small amount of money on something generic. Spend no money on something that is unique to you, but perhaps not that good. And then you'll slowly start to get better and you can build up to something that's really decent. All the companies that are really good with video were not very good for a while. Like even the likes of Wixs and stuff, you can go back and you can see it. So don't think about being great out the door, just try something. This stuff takes time. The other thing in terms of strategies, I think, like if you're going to try and build a brand audience for your video content and do this sort of, maybe think about doing a series, what you really need to do is get clear on who your niche audience is. And this is different from just like the product marketing work of working out who your customers are and your personas. This isn't about that. This is like, is there a community or a niche or a subculture that I can speak to? Because the way brands grow is that people talk to each other and they talk about your brand. So you need to speak to a group of people that are already talking to each other. And in most cases, your target customers don't spend that much time talking to each other. There's going to be a kind of broader, a more specific definition that includes some of your target customers that you can really speak to. So if we're, if we're like a digital agency like Overdrive, our customers are going to be kind of people who need, PPC and SEO services in specific, let's say medium-sized companies or whatever. Well, that's fine, but that's not really a group of audience. But there is a group of audience that's like, well, okay, let's go for the people who attend Brighton SEO, or let's think about like there's people who use this piece of software or something. There is a community within that mix that we can speak to. And I think what businesses need to do is get clear on who their community is and who they are going to make this content for. And then when they get towards making the content, make it super specific for those people. The best content is really specific and niche, and the worst is super, super broad and generic. So that's why you need to get like clear on who that is. And that is hard and takes a lot of work and is something that people need to sort of invest time in researching and understanding. So I think those are the two things that companies should start with. The other thing is, when you understand who your audience is, everything becomes easier, because you start to get ideas for how you can serve them. You can speak to them. You can actually understand. And then you can start to develop this content strategy that's really going to work for that group of people.
Fascinating. And you recommend starting, I guess, as small and as focused as possible with that group?
Absolutely, yeah.
Like you say, the people who attend this particular conference, or the people who,
Yeah, and then like speak to someone, work out what unites them, what's their interest. So like, let's say I sell plumbing supplies. Okay, well, there's something about, who's my audience there? Well, for my customer audience, it's going to be people who are looking, there's going to be a mixture of some DIY people, there's going to be some professionals or whatever. But what might unite a subset of them is they're people who like have vans. Okay, so people who have vans. Well, people who have vans is the community that talk to each other, because a lot of people really love vans. Okay, so we can think about making content that's like about like vans and setting that up that would really, really appeal and be very interesting to that group of people. So that might become our audience or something like that. So you can kind of think about it in those.
Yeah, and suddenly like the ideas are just, well, I guess it's so much easier, like you say, to come up with ideas once you've figured that out.
Exactly. You could do Pimp My Ride for plumbers. That would be a great show.
Genius.
Yeah, but like it's that kind of thing. Is if you get clear on the audience, everything falls into place.
Yeah.
And most of the companies I see doing quite generic or low quality content is because they've not worked out who the audience is. Yeah,
that's a great point to end on. And look, thank you so much for joining me and having a chat. And if people want to go and find out a little bit more about Phil Nottingham, where can they find you?
It's a good question, because I've sort of taken my website down and redoing it at the moment. So probably on Twitter at Phil Nottingham.
Cool. Well, we'll drop a little link into the post. And thanks so much. Good luck with everything, and speak soon.
Lovely. Thanks, Rob.